Recently, as I was preparing my latest Snoke theory, wherein General Merrick's mustache, Sio Bibble, and the High Ground of Mustafar all worked in tandem to produce who we know to be the Supreme Leader, I came to an unexpected and startling realization. Perhaps I've reached the end of an era, in regards to the reading club. I then immediately called my biannual meeting of nobles, consisting of friends both old and new. After hours of debate, and with no one being able to explain why Thrawn would trust an admiral in battle who would come to view his tactics as games, a tough decision was reached. It was time to move on. I just wasn't the same non-canon expert that I was roughly a year ago. I had to say goodbye to my friends. But who could come to replace them? Were there other friends whose stories needed to be told? Where would I even begin to look? And then it hit me. The contingency. We can find a new Demence. And I know exactly where I can find new and exciting stories, which have been right under our noses the entire time. I think it's time that I stop and take a real hard and truthful look at myself, and recognize that no more am I the non-canon expert, but the Targaryen Expert. Aegon I, also known as Aegon the Conqueror and Aegon the Dragon, was the first Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and first King of the Iron Throne, ushering in a Targaryen Dynasty within Westeros. Tall and powerful in his appearance, with purple eyes and hair of silver gold, the future king was born on Dragonstone in 27 BC, or before the Conquering, to Lord Aerion and Lady Valenna. Aegon had two sisters, one older than himself named Visenya, and one younger named Rhaenys. In keeping in line with Valyrian and Targaryen tradition, Aegon chose to marry a sibling. However, rather than taking only one of his sisters as his wife, as per the tradition, he married both of them. Aegon's path to conquering the Seven Kingdoms and sitting upon the Iron Throne started after the period known as the Century of Blood, a time wherein Volantis attempted to expand their power by arguing that they were the rightful heirs to what still existed of the Valyrian freehold. Following the Century of Blood, Aegon turned his attention to Westeros, having previously visited Oldtown and Lannisport. The events that would ultimately come to place Aegon upon the throne were initiated when he declined an invitation to marry the Storm King's daughter, prompting the Storm King to cut off the hands of Aegon's envoy and send them back to Dragonstone. Aegon and his counselors consulted for 6 days after this incident, after which they declared Aegon's claim to the throne to every lord in Westeros. Utilizing and benefiting from the power of his 3 dragons, Aegon and his wives ultimately conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, with Dorne remaining as the only holdout. Having defeated his enemies, Aegon chose not to rule from the traditional Oldtown or from Dragonstone. Rather, he chose to make his seat at Aegon Fort, the precursor to what would become King's Landing. To create his Iron Throne, Aegon took the swords of his defeated enemies and forged them in what was to become a visual depiction of the king's authority. Further, Aegon also created the offices of the Small Council and the Hand of the King, wherein his friend Orys Baratheon became the First Hand. The fact that Aegon came to unite the traditionally warring kingdoms under one rule, at only the age of 27, spoke of how remarkable a man he was. Nonetheless, despite the king's exceptional vision and determination, the task was one ripe with difficulty and cost. One of the great visions of Aegon was the city that was to emerge as King's Landing. Initially known as Aegon Fort, Aegon sought to turn the royal city that bore his name into one that not only rivaled, but surpassed the cities of Lannisport and Oldtown. This vision ultimately came to fruition, as by 10 AC, or years after the conquering, King's Landing emerged as a true city. By 25 AC, King's Landing became the third largest city of the realm, thereby requiring walls to be raised around its borders. In 35 AC, when the city grew past its modest initial structures, Aegon raised a castle known as the Red Keep that would be fit for the Targaryens and their heirs. Although Aegon's reign would go down as a glorious one, there was one event that stood out as a glaring defeat for the king, the First Dornish War, which lasted from 4 AC to 13 AC. The war was not only tragic in that it spilled a tremendous amount of the realm's blood, but it also cost Aegon his younger sister and wife, the Queen Rhaenys. However, out of the First Dornish War did come one important creation that would come to shape the history of the realm, the creation of the Sworn Brotherhood of the Kingsguard. The Kingsguard was born out of the realities of the war, wherein Aegon and the Lords of Dorne each placed bounties on each other's heads, resulting in many murders and retaliations. It wasn't until Aegon was attacked and barely survived in 10 AC that the Kingsguard was conceived. However, despite his good fortune to survive the attack, it still took his remaining wife, the Queen Visenya, to convince him that his existing guards were not sufficient. Therefore, it was Visenya and not Aegon who decided upon the nature of the Kingsguard. She modeled their vows after the vows taken by those of the Night's Watch, to ensure that the guardsmen forfeited everything except their duty to the king. Further, although Aegon wanted to hold a grand tournament to choose the members of the Kingsguard, Visenya persuaded him that more than just skill with a blade would be necessary to protect him, and spoke of the necessity of unwavering loyalty. Therefore, Aegon entrusted Visenya to select the first members of the Kingsguard. Visenya's selections could not have been better, as 2 died in their service to the king, and all served with honor until their death. 37 years after he conquered Westeros to become its first king upon the Iron Throne, Aegon died of a stroke while giving a speech in his birthplace of Dragonstone. Aegon left his realm in a state of peace, and was recognized to have ruled with wisdom and courage. His body was burned in the citadel of Dragonstone, as was called for by Targaryen and Valyrian custom. So there we have it, King Aegon I, the first king of the Targaryen Dynasty. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Game of Thrones theories and discussions? Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me, for traditions.